All right. Welcome, everyone. To all you listening to the recording and those that are here live. This is Planning Your Marketing for what? A ridiculously awesome 2020. Not just a good 2020, a ridiculously awesome 2020. I don't know if you would like it to be that successful next year. I know I would. So it's all about that. And the content today, look, a lot of us already know how to planning. You might be even able to tell me or show me a plan that's even better than mine. And I love that. And if you have some content you want to share with me, awesome. But the things I want to share with you today are a couple mindsets, a couple ways of thinking about things to hopefully inspire you with your planning, because a lot of it's just being inspired enough to actually do it. When it comes time to actually do it, it's not all that complicated. So we're going to share some mindsets here, and then some tools and some examples and some easy methodologies for how you might address your planning. You are, you're the captain of your own ship here. Or if you're on a team, it's your plan, but I have some ideas to try to inspire you and help you. So let's get started. Can anyone relate to this? For those listening in on a phone call, we have a guy on a hamster wheel in the office. And this is exactly what it can feel like when you don't have a plan. When you don't have a plan, when you're not definitive about your quarters or about your objectives, it can feel like you're just continuing to do the same thing. I've definitely felt like this. I've been a marketing manager at a company where all we did was the monthly campaign. And it felt like I just kept doing the monthly campaign. It never really added up. It never really got any better. We never really worked on the thing itself. I kept doing the busy work, right? Well, planning gets you out of that. Planning hops you off. All you have to do is step left, step right, and he gets off the hamster wheel, but he's stuck on it right now. So a little bit of planning can make things feel a lot more exciting. And I got to tell you, our friends over in sales, they have the definitive feeling of excitement that comes from a closed deal. Why? Because it started and it stopped, right? They have that start-stop feel. In marketing, we can kind of feel like we're scientists continuing experimenting, and we're always kind of improving the situation. We don't really have that start and stop. So the planning can really pay off for us. It feels better. It's more effective. It's a lot of fun. So want to ask you a question, and this is for those in the chat, and you can be thinking about it. Just telecommunicate psychically to me if you're listening to the recording. What is December all about? You've got a new year coming up. What do you do in December? Kind of just share with me in the Zoom webinar chat. What kind of activities do you do in December leading up to next year? Do you have special meetings? Do you write out certain things? Do you write things down? What do you do? Go ahead and throw that in the chat. Tell me what you do in this last month of the year, if anything. If you don't do anything, that's okay too. Tell me, no, it's just another month in the year, and we just kind of roll with it that way. So let me know what you do. I have a lot of people that, okay, we have a lot of things that came in. Reflect, scope on the needs for next year. Audit campaigns and outline the first iteration for the 2020 strategy. That sounds good. Those are some really good answers. When I was asked this question myself, I said plan. A couple of people said pray. Some other folks said party. I don't know why all the P's came from. Getting ready for the next board meeting in January. That's something you have to prepare for. I also see it's hard to prioritize planning when you still have to get stuff done. And probably a different word for S on that too. You got to get things done. It's hard to plan and prioritize. So we're going to address some of that. But I just want to give you a second to pause and just think about this. We do a little bit of planning and hopefully, but we know we need to. And on the personal side, you'll want to do that as well. Like, where do you want your career to go? Where do you want to go as a marketer? What do you want to do next? December is a great time to think about that. But guess what? This may be the very last webinar you hear this year, right? Then we're into next year. But it's also potentially the last webinar you're going to hear this decade, 2019, right? Here we come up. We're at the end of a decade. So just consider that not only is this a good time to plan like you might normally, but it's a great time to plan for the next 10 years. And there's a great quote that Tony Robbins has that says, most people overestimate what they can get done in a year, but they underestimate what they can get done in 10. And just kind of think about that. Overestimate what you can do in a year. Oh, and all these things, and only some of them happen, right? but they underestimate just what kind of power there is over 10 years. And the best way to think about that is think back 10 years from now, 10 years prior to now. I did this exercise earlier, and it's hard. LinkedIn's very helpful for this. So you pop open your LinkedIn, go look back 10 years from now and see where you were. I was in one of my very first marketing jobs ever. And you think back to where you were, and I think to where you are now. And that was maybe without any kind of planning. You're that much wiser, smarter, maybe beyond where you were before. You got some more things figured out. Think about what would happen if you spent a little more time this month planning out not only 2020, but also the next 10 years as you're looking at not only your company you're at, but your career as a whole. Just ponder that. Just ponder, wow, maybe this is that time. So I got inspired hearing this. I'd love for you to be inspired. Just think, what could you do in 10 years? That's some amazing things there. So that's why we're here. We're here to talk about this, talk about some mindsets, and get inspired, and then have some methodologies that'll make it a little bit easier to put some of this in action. If you haven't met me, hello. My name is Casey Cheshire. 3 numbers to get to know me by. And I know some of you already know what these numbers mean. 10, number of years I've been working with marketing automation. 10, that's a decade right there, like we're just talking about. 2,500, the number of Pardot implementations we've done at Cheshire Impact, and a lot more Pardot projects beyond that number. And finally, there's a new number for you all. And I know a lot of you have been to some of my previous webinars. And if you remember what some of my previous numbers were, do you remember what they indicated? There was like a 32 and it meant a certain thing. Well, we have a new number now, and it is 229. And that is the number of days until I get on a big plane and I fly to Tanzania to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro. So that's a countdown. So if you join me for a webinar next month, that number will be lower and lower and lower every day. And I'll keep you up to date on the journey because I got to get ready for that thing. It's 19,000 plus feet. So it'll be a little bit of effort. So we like adventure. We like marketing here. And we really like connecting and caring about our customers and our people. That's me. So let's get cranking. Oh, by the way, if any of you want to join me, just shoot me an email. Let's go. I'll share my packing list with you. All right, let's talk about the agenda for today. One, we want to talk about the most overused word in marketing. And while I'm going through this agenda, go ahead and take your best guess at what the most overused word in marketing is in the webinar chat. What is the most overused word in marketing? We're going to talk about that and then actually clear up the mystery around it. Campaigns is a good one. Integrate is a good one. So keep your guesses going. Then we're going to talk about starting with why. If you've heard of Simon Sinek, we're going to talk about him and talk about how we can apply that to our planning. And then we're going to talk about the what and how we can approach planning. I've got some examples. I've got some screenshots of some great plans. I've got some strategies on how to plan and really get into a 3-month tempo and get a quarterly tempo is what they call it. And also what these things called rocks are and where they came from. Finally, I want to chat a little agile marketing with y'all. I don't know if any of you have been doing that yet or looked into that, but it intrigues me. And I've talked to a couple people now on the podcast that I want to share some of the takeaways with you. It might make for a nice something you start into on 2020. And if you're interested, maybe we do a whole webinar on it. All right. So the votes are in: campaigns, integrated, conversion, streamline, robust, leads, strategic. Kim, winner. We'll send you the chicken dinner. Most overused word in marketing is strategy. Strategy, strategic, strategery, strategy and tactics, strategy. It's so crazy. And I must admit, that number, and when I was saying like 10 years ago when I was first coming up in the ranks, reporting to the people on high, talking about their strategies, I don't even know what it meant. And I actually didn't know what it meant until a couple of years ago when I actually Googled it, the definition of it. And the definition is not too complicated. It's a little bit backwards, but it only has 2 parts to it. Strategy is literally having a goal and then creating a plan to achieve that goal. That's it. Google it. Don't take my word for it. It literally talks about having an end state in mind and then having some steps to take to get there. That's it. So if you think about the word strategy, let's get strategic on this. Well, that's a very tactical approach. Let's get strategic. All we're saying when we say strategy is that we want to have a goal, and sometimes we don't have a goal in mind, right? and we also want to make steps to get there. The reason I bring this up is that if we talk about planning our marketing for next year, we need to start with goals, right? We don't want to start with just the plan. To make a plan strategic, you have to have a goal and steps to accomplish it. That's simple. And just think, if you just, kept it simple, keep it simple, stupid, and you just literally had a one pager where you had several key goals you want to accomplish, and you had the immediate steps or the large projects you're going to do each quarter to get there, boom, you have a marketing plan. So let's start simple here, but then we're going to build out from there. Just remember, it doesn't take much to be strategic. And now, anytime you hear someone use this word, drop in the definition and see if it still fits. And I guarantee you, the people that you're going to hear say this word don't always know what it means. But now you do, and you can decide what you want to do and how you want to correct people. It's all about having a goal and an outcome. An outcome and then steps to accomplish that goal. All right. So in order to have that goal, we need to understand why we're doing this in the first place. And a great example of how to have a goal, or the importance of having a goal before you have the steps to get there, is the golden white paper. Some of you may have heard this story before. I was visiting a large organization, and we were talking about content and landing pages and nurturing. And I was asking about the different content they had, and they wanted to share with me. They had this very special piece of content. Don't worry, it's none of you here. A very special piece of content. I said, "Tell me about this." It was an on-site, and tell me about this. And they were like, "Well, we paid an attorney in New York City. It was $1,000 an hour to write this thing for us." And I was like, "Wow, amazing. How long is this thing?" It's 27 pages. And so I was intrigued at this golden white paper. And so then I asked them, "Well, what question did this answer for your buyer? Or, what was your goal with this piece? What were you trying to accomplish? What were you trying to move buyers from A to Z, or get them in, from awareness to known, move them through the funnel? What was the purpose of this?" And heads started going down, and all the eye contact ceased almost immediately. And what they had all realized, and I realized at the time, was that they had just sort of created this to create it. They went right to the plan. Let's create white paper that says X, Y, and Z. And they didn't really have a why. They didn't really have a purpose or an understanding of what they wanted to do and why they wanted to do it, or who they wanted to help, or any of those things. So don't be like them. And by the way, I don't know how long it took this attorney to write 27 pages, but I got to imagine it's more than an hour a page, right? So anyways, that sounds like a great white paper for him to write, or her to write, but not so much for that marketing team. Thankfully, they were able to salvage some of that, but that's a perfect example of just kind of going, right? Maybe, hey, let's have a white paper Q1. Well, why? Where does this add in? What are the themes of each quarter? Where do we want to go at the end of next year? What do we want to be true in order for this year to be successful? It's a very simple question, and it's like the minimum you could think about. If you just ask yourself one question, when 2020 is over, what has to be true in order for you to be happy about that year? And also ask that same question to other people. Ask your boss, ask the other leaders. Hey, ask the CEO. Hey, and if this year is over, 2020 is over, we're celebrating, what's happened? What has you thinking this was a good year from marketing standpoint? And ask sales that too. Good question to know up front. Has you ever heard of Simon Sinek? This good-looking British guy. If you have, say yes. If you know of any of his books, say yes. Throw those into the webinar chat. Going to keep you on your toes. Can't just be watching YouTube while listening to this webinar. Got to keep these things interactive. So yes, this is the interactive portion of this webinar. Simon Sinek, have you heard of him? Have you not heard of him? So we have a yes. Steve, any books come to mind? Candace, no. Christina, have you heard of him? Kelly, yes. For those who have heard of him, what books have you heard of? And he's got some new ones out. Yeah, Steve, thank you. That's exactly it. Start with Why. There's a book called Start with Why, and I recommend you all read it. Or if you're not big onto reading, or there's also an Audible book, and you can hear his classy British voice telling you what's what. There's also, for those that want to get things done, to the earlier statement, there's a great TED Talk. TED, TED, TED TV has a great TED Talk. I think it's not even an hour. sentences. It's much shorter than his book, and it is on the same concepts. And in the book, he talks about the difference between two particular companies. One is Dell, who you may or may not have heard of, depending on how old you are. And the other one is Apple, which you for sure have heard of, unless you were just born the other day. You probably still have heard of them. You know how to use an iPhone better than I do. So he compares these two companies and he says, well, what's the difference? They both make computers. They're both kind of gray. This one's lighter on the left side. What's the difference? He says, look, Apple started with a why in mind. A why, aka a purpose, an aka a mission to help a group, to help people, or to do something in particular, right? Whereas Dell was selling computers, and whether they had a mission or not, it wasn't very clear. And it was very much more clear that they were just selling computers. And not only that, but when it came time to market them, he made this distinction that Apple, what do they think about an Apple commercial versus, you don't even see them anymore, but a Dell commercial? Dell might say, well, we have a Pentium 9000, whatever the chip is these days, Moore's Law. We have a Pentium 9000. It has this much gigabytes of RAM. And a lot of us are thinking, wow, I didn't even have a gig. I don't even know I was lucky to have a megabyte back in the day, right? So Dell has all these different specifications. What happens with Apple? They go, no, think differently. Go for a run and listen to all your tunes on this phone, right? Differently. And their why is actually think differently. And you could see a lot of the innovation came from a lot of that. And yes, he does crush a little bit hard on Apple in the book, which is why the TED Talk can be a little bit easier to listen to, unless you want to crush on Apple as well. But what he does is he introduces this. And if you haven't seen this, it's a really cool, it's very simple idea, simple concept, but you could really think about it as the weeks go on, especially as you're thinking about your planning. Even if you already got some planning steps in place, just think about this. It's called the golden circle. And the idea is the best companies like Apple start with why they do things, why they're doing it in the first place. And he says, but most companies start on the outside of the circle and they talk about what they do. Right? A good example of that would be Dell. What do you do? We have computers. What do they have in them? They have this capability and this feature set and this capability, and they're all gray, and here you go. Apple's like, don't worry about the specifications. Yeah, I mean, they have that in the iStore, right? If you go in there, they have specifications. But they don't start with that. They start with, hey, we're here. Think differently. Our purpose is to sort of just revolutionize how you're doing things, right? Just, interact with electronics in a totally different way. We're here to create art, right? We're going to make sure the edges are beveled and, the camera looks different. It's like a totally different purpose, but people dig that. They're like, oh, cool. I get it. You're here to make things beautiful. And then, they have, capabilities inside, but they started from that direction. And so some people also start in that how, but it's like a different way of going about it. So the whole concept is to start with the why, start with a purpose. So Treasure Impact, right? So we really wrestled with this. We actually evolved over several different years, different whys. Our why right now is to make marketers heroes. That's it. Make marketers heroes. Everything else comes from that. Yes. Well, and then what do we do? Well, yes, we'll do these programs. We'll help you execute Pardot or help you execute Salesforce. How do we do it? We do it with this process or this process. But before we even get to that, we start with why. We just start with, hey, we're here to make you a hero. However we do it or whatever technology we use, we want you to be a hero in your company by the end of the day, right? So when you're done working with us, you're like, wow, I'm kind of getting kudos from all over the place. And we want you to get credit for that. So that's our why. It drives us. And the concept would start with why is make that known in your marketing. Make that known in your presentation first. Maybe it's subtly, maybe just stating it. But rather than going right to the specifications of what you do, start with why you're doing it in the first place. And a lot of people will say, a lot of companies sell how they do things instead of what the result is or why they do things in the first place. So just consider that. Consider the purpose in mind, Simon Sinek. Now, purpose isn't, in his book is cool, but you're like, well, Apple, they're just fantastic anyways. But there's kind of a follow-on to this story. There was this pharmaceutical company with 81,000 reps in the United States, and that is a terrifying number. unless you're in healthcare and for life sciences. Hello, nice to meet you, but it's still a terrifying number. Uh, and this company wanted to know what made a really good pharmaceutical rep. And so what they did is they hired this brilliant lady to come in and interview and sit with thousands of their top reps. And they actually did a kind of a blind test with her. They didn't tell her necessarily who the best ones were, but they had her visit and tag along with some good ones, some great ones, some amazing ones, some bad ones, and wanted her to see, who was the best rep and if there were any particular patterns that made the best sales rep. And it ends up being a great book. If you haven't read this yet or heard of it, it's really kind of a sales book. But this is a huge book. If you're in marketing, your other marketing competition's not reading this book. So I totally recommend you check this out. Yeah, no worries, Selena. Just pick it up on the recording. No worries. So selling with noble purpose. What she found out, Lisa Earl McLeod, fantastic book, great study. She found out the reps that did the best had a purpose for being there. They were literally trying to help the people in the lobby. One rep was like, look, when I go into the lobby and I see the people and they're sick there and they're in pain, that's the reason I'm there. That's the reason I drive all over the place and I work so hard is for those people. People that are like, well, I'm trying to hit my number. I have an activity number I have to hit and this and that and this and that. Or I guess you got to do my job or check the box, that kind of thing. Weren't as successful. And the key performers were the ones that had a purpose. They're really trying to help the people in those offices. They really wanted those doctors to be able to get this cure in the hands of the people that needed it. And it wasn't like BS. It was like they really were driven. Like, they were tearing up thinking about the people they were trying to help. And so she goes into much more detail in the book, but again, great, maybe, holiday reading to really kind of supercharge your marketing. But this is an example of a why, right? When that rep goes into the office, their why is to help those sick people. Okay. That's their why. All the other things, the how, the what they're selling, all those things that will come. But most importantly, when they sit down with that doctor, they're here to help that doctor help people. Very clear. And the success comes from that. The same thing can happen in marketing if we really want to help the people and our buyers, our prospects. If we really want to help them, good things come from that. And if you're at a company and you don't really like your buyer, or you don't like the product, or you don't even think it works, leave. Go somewhere else, quit, join a different company, find a different industry. But life's too short to do bad marketing or sort of okay marketing, like okay commercial you see on TV. Life's too short for that. Be in a company where you believe in the product or the service and you really care. You have that noble purpose. Even if your company doesn't have the noble purpose, but you can, as a marketer, you can get that product in the right hands. Another good example of this is Southwest. Southwest, their why, as far as I know, and for a long time, is to be the low-cost airline. And they sort of started out where everyone was kind of doing different fancy things and were kind of expensive. And they're like, nope, we're going to be the low-cost airline. Well, you see, a good why drives action. It's not just like a statement. Oh, well, one of our whys used to be important or like make people important. Well, that's nice, but does it answer a question for you? Like, oh, should we take on this project that's B2B marketing analytics? Well, I don't know, be important. It doesn't really answer the question. Southwest answers the question. And one of the things that they had, I think it was in a Covey book, was this example where they didn't even ask the president, but they had this dilemma at Southwest. They had salads. This is how you know it's an old example, because I can't imagine Southwest having a salad because Delta barely even has a salad. So, but this was the question back in the day. It was like Southwest, they had a salad and they were thinking of getting rid of the olives in the salad. And, when you sell millions or have millions of salad a year, the olives add up. So they were looking at potentially, if they got rid of the olives, they might save several $1,000,000 in costs. Imagine that, right? Sometimes when we're trying to send an email out and get a bunch of clicks and all that, in Southwest, they just need to maybe get rid of the olives and save $1,000,000, right? It's crazy to think about, but this was the case. So they were really trying to think, well, should we get rid of the olives? By the way, do you love olives or not? Throw that in the chat. I really want to know. And what kind? And do you put olives in that martini or not? Throw that in there. Let me know, because these are important facts for me to know about the audience so I can customize this webinar for you. So Southwest was trying to decide, oh, and by the way, would you get rid of the olives or not? Um, you love them, you hate them, but if you were Southwest, would you get rid of the olives or not? And the only thing I can tell you, the only hint is your why as a company is to be the low-cost airline. Be a low-cost airline. Do you kill the olives or not? And you know what? Some executives were like, no, we can't get rid of the olives. Why? Some people love olives. Noel loves olives. Conoco does too. I used to like them on the Mexican pizza at Taco Bell. Yeah, I mean, Kim, you love olives too. We could all love olives together. So, board meeting, everyone loves olives, but what is the why? Oh, Robert, you love them too. Hey, Bob, you gotta put yourself down as Bob. But it's good to see you. So yeah, we all love olives here, but guess what? Their why is to be the low-cost airline. So they didn't even have to ask the CEO or go up the food chain. Do we do this? Do we do that? Right? They're trying to, it's like, do you bug the boss with some like little stupid question? No, didn't have to. Right? They killed the olives. Why? Because they're the low-cost airline. That's a why they can help you drive action. That's a why that can help you answer questions. Cheshire Impact. We're here to make marketers heroes. So, do we come out with a book that's all about HR tips and tricks? No, we don't. It's easy. You don't even have to ask me, right? Or do we come out with a book on marketing careers and how to help marketers with their career advancement to become CMOs? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it fits the why. So you can see how those kind of questions, now you still may have to have a discussion, but it can easily change the conversation, having a little bit of a why. Consider the why, if you have one or not. Does your company have one or not? Consider asking. And if you are the one deciding some of these things, consider writing one, even if it's just the marketing team's why. Your company doesn't necessarily have one. Maybe the whole organization will get inspired by the fact that marketing is leading the charge and you have a departmental why. And that's just all about it. So cool. Oh, and I wrote here too. If you don't have control of your department and you can't decide that, have a personal why, and that might be to help people, certain kind of people, certain kind of industry, or it might just be to help people find the best products that'll solve their pain. And if the company you're at can help you do that, great. That's what it's all about. So company why, department why, personal why. Either way, have that noble purpose, and you know what? Your marketing will literally be better. And you won't spend $1,000 on a $27,000 an hour on a 27-page white paper. All right, so we've got this sort of why conversation, and I'm glad you hung in with me on that. Sometimes you can be kind of like, oh yeah, sure, why? But what I really like about Lisa's book is it cements it. It says, okay, look, I know all this sort of happy foo-foo stuff sounds crazy, but Lisa's like, no, but literally it made for the best sales reps. Like, hire people with a noble purpose. Hire marketers with a noble purpose. If you're a marketer, have a noble purpose. If you can't find one with your company, get one in your department or get a personal one. All right, let's talk about what. We started with why. Simon Sinek's happy. He can go away now. What do we do? Well, when it comes to actually figuring out what you want to do in a particular year, it's all about assessment. I think it was Conoco or someone else was saying you do an assessment at the very beginning. Who does assessments here? Go ahead and throw it in chat. Do you kind of do a review, do an audit? I think it was an audit that someone was talking about. Do you do that at the beginning of the year? And here's Tony Robbins on stage doing his thing. I've had a chance to go to a couple of his events. Very interesting. Happy to share experiences with you about that. Recommend it. It was actually really kind of cool. But here's one of the things I want to share with you. And consider this. I know we're talking about planning your marketing, but just even personally, consider this particular wheel. And one of the things we did with this wheel, it was all about taking an assessment of your life right now. And what you basically do is there's these little tick marks all the way up to, from 0 to 10 for all these different aspects. And, from a personal standpoint, you basically, screenshot this if you want. You could probably find it there if you type in Tony Robbins wheel, but screenshot this or just draw your own. Take the same process. Oh, sounds like Kim, you do an audit. Yeah, that's great. Good. This is the same kind of thing. You go through this thing. By the way, I highly recommend you just do this personally, like off of this webinar. Just do this personally. Get a little practice. If you can help plan your own thing, you can help plan your company's thing. So you go through and you basically you circle a little tick mark of where you feel like you're at with that particular aspect. And and no judgment, wherever you're at, you're at. don't have to share it with anyone. But what's really interesting is once you do that, you connect all the dots together and you have this kind of funky shape. And that shape is where you're at. And the cool thing is, if you do it next year, if you do it after that, you can see if you've changed anywhere. But also, you can identify where the big gaps, and that's what we're talking about here. So I think when I went through this, I think, for me, like relationships was one. I was like, I really want to. Oh no, family and friends. I want to spend more time with family and friends, right? Health. Wanted to work on some health. Little I know I was gonna be climbing a mountain, so I needed to really crank that into gear. Um, and also contribution. Wanted to help more people out. And so those were some low ones. And this is just wherever you think it is. So it's kind of subjective. And so I was like, okay, that's low, that's low, that's low. Other ones are kind of high, or they're middle and they're okay. And you can kind of figure out where are the super low ones that you might want to focus more time on, right? So this kind of exercise, consider doing that same exact thing after doing it for yourself. What if you put marketing things around that circle, right? What if you put lead gen, content, marketing and sales alignment? What if you put some of those factors around that? Now you've got your own health assessment. And maybe you don't even share this with anyone, but it's something that you kind of just spend a few minutes alone prepping yourself to figure out what you want to talk about. And maybe what you want to address the next time you have a meeting with sales, or what you want to bring up on the marketing team meeting later. So take the same thing, instead of Tony Robbins on stage. Hi, how's it going? Say yes, Tony Robbins. Casey Robbins here. So we created something similar to that wheel, right? Totally make up your own. If you have a cool one, send a picture to me. Send a picture if you do like a marketing circle. That sounds fantastic. Let me know how it goes. It's Casey@CheshireImpact.com. So that's sort of the overall marketing approach. Now, we made one of these type assessments for marketing automation, and some of you are very aware of this. You have a CSI score already. Some of you don't. But we created a roadmap for marketing automation. It's also an assessment. So instead of making up your own areas around the circle, we have 10 areas to ask you questions about. And if you haven't done this, this is like the one thing I recommend you do before the end of the year, because what we can do as a result of this, once we go through these 10 questions with you, we can then give you a score between 0 and 10 of where you're at with marketing automation. And then the cool thing is there's also a next step, because these are actually in order. With that circle, that flywheel from Tony Robbins, no one tells you what you should probably focus on. So you might just focus on wealth. People might do that too much. Well, let's say you have a thing on marketing automation. You maybe don't want to focus on some of these things before you focus on the things that have to happen first. So they're in order, and that can really make you feel a lot more comfortable knowing that there's an order to the chaos. So it looks like this. There's 10 different steps. There's a question to each one, and we ask you the question. And by the way, if you're interested in this, you don't know your CSI score, and you're interested, all you have to do is type CSI in your webinar chat window. And what we'll do is we'll see that, we'll see your name, and we'll reach out and we'll schedule it with you. All it takes is 30 minutes. We ask you the questions and we talk through, what are your strategies for next year and then where do you want to go, and then help you figure out how you can improve your marketing automation, improve your use of Pardot along with your plan. It's really cool. And it's free. Hello. So just type in CSI into webinar chat, or if you're feeling kind of shy, you can send me an email at casey@CheshireImpact.com, or you can type it in the Q&A menu. Either way, all different ways. You don't have to fill out a form. You don't have to do anything strenuous here. You just type CSI and we help you out with that. And again, not trying to sell anything, trying to get you an understanding of what your assessment is on marketing automation. And maybe you find out you're a 2 out of 10 with marketing automation. That's okay, because now you know the next step for you to go is 3, 4, 5, 6, that kind of thing. All right. When we do the CSI with you, and let's say you're working with us, and some of you listening to this are, some of you not, you just met us, but we do work with companies. We help them tactically, just doing the Pardot to-dos and the Salesforce, like, hey, build this thing out in Salesforce, this report or that report. We also help with a strategy. Hey, I'm missing this strategy in Pardot. I don't know what to do here. I want to do better nurturing. We help out on that side too. But one of the things we like to do is we have a plan with 2 different sides on it. And I show you this so you could potentially think of doing your own. Oftentimes you might have heard this phrase, working in the business or on the business. And working in the business can be often thought of that tactical, kind of getting all the busy things done, busy, 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 working in the business. But then people always encourage folks to work on the business. So think about working in the marketing versus on the marketing, strategy versus tactical. Now we have strategic here, and we learned earlier that that just means you have a goal and you're working toward it. So that kind of indicates that our strategic things are the bigger picture items that we're working toward. And those immediate tactical things are like those things you just got to get done. So I like seeing this approach because let's say you've got some campaign you got to get out. And, you know, the CSI is not some highfalutin thing where stop everything you're doing and just do what Casey said on the webinar, right? That wouldn't maybe get you that far. Maybe it would, but you still got to get your day-to-day, your monthly to-dos done. And so I like to put those down in the immediate, the tactical side. And that's like, okay, what do we have right now? But then that allows me to have a draw line and separate out what do I want to do on the strategic side. And what we put over there is the CSI. So let's say you had a particular score. The lowest number on the CSI is where we want you to start. So let's say you had an incomplete score on CSI number 2. It's all about first ROI touch tracking. Great. As far as we're concerned, if there's a few minutes left in the day, right? Let's say you're working with us for 40 hours a month and we've got some extra time. All those immediate tacticals are done. We're going to say, let's work on that CSI over here. Let's improve your marketing automation a little bit strategically now that the tactical stuff is done. Other companies deliberately say, let's spend a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there. So that's the approach that I like to take. Consider that kind of approach as you're planning as well. Consider separating out the strategic, the bigger picture items from the immediate. Because if you put them all together, what happens? You typically sort them by deadline. If you sort them by deadline, what's going to happen? Tactical. What's never going to happen? Strategic. And you might find yourself back on that wooden hamster wheel that we showed at the very beginning of this whole presentation. So consider allocating a little bit of time here and a little bit of time there. Just a quick review. Utilize a roadmap if you don't have one. A plan, plan is a great roadmap. We've got one, the CSI for you. If you haven't already gotten your CSI score, all you have to do is put CSI in there. And but either way, use a roadmap. Have some kind of direction. And of course, you need to know which way you're going to. So that why tells you why you're in the car in the first place and then where you want to go. Now what? Make sure you tie everything into revenue in the back end. Make sure it's measurable. We'll talk about measurable in just a second. Let's hit up the how real quick. Quick story time. I know we've got some minutes left. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this. The race to the South Pole. Familiar with this? Munson versus Scott. There's 2 different people. I love this infographic. Reddington, thanks. Appreciate it. It was a race to the South Pole, and you should Google it, look up an article on it. There's some great stories on it. But essentially, there's 2 different explorers who were going to take the same thing. They're going to somehow get to Antarctica, and they're going to somehow get to the South Pole. And it was dramatically different planning that went on between the 2 of them. Roald was a fantastic guy and very interesting. He took a few guys, a whole bunch of dogs and dog sleds, more supplies than he needed to be sure he planned ahead. And dog sleds were trusted. He actually, he adventured all the way up from, I think it was from Sweden or somewhere north, all the way down to London and Europe and Paris. And he was doing all these trips like himself athletically. He was like either hiking or walking or running it or running dog sleds, or like he was literally working out and practicing on his way. Meanwhile, Scott was always the adventurer, and he took like brand new motor sleds, which would eventually become like snowmobiles, but they were kind of untested, and he didn't really plan as much, didn't give himself as much leeway. And he also would race there. If the weather was good, he'd go really fast and go crazy. If the weather was bad, they'd sit there all day. Roald or Munson had a different plan. His plan was no matter what they did, they were always going to go 20 miles every day. So if it was the worst day ever, they'd still go 20 miles. If it was the best day ever, they'd still go 20 miles. Like, it's still a good day. Let's go further. Nope, 20 miles. And it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare story in the old fable, but it literally worked. So 20 miles a day, and he got there. He got back, plenty of supplies. Really kind of a tragic story with Scott. I mean, I think everyone died. It was one of those things, and people found his journal later. The sleds froze. They missed their supply depot by like 10 miles. It was just a really bad day on that team. Whereas the 20-mile march is what it's called. The 20-mile march is what Munson was doing, and that's something that we can do as well in marketing, right? So consider not trying to accomplish everything. We've thought about what we want to do and where we want to get to and why we're doing it. Maybe you have the outcome, that you answer that question, what has to be true at the end of this year for us to be happy with what marketing did, with what our company did. So there's your destination. Don't consider like you have to rush to get there. You've got 4 quarters, you've got 12 months. Consider a 20-mile march. What are we going to do this week, then this week, then this week, then this week, this day, then this day, then this day? Consider that approach of the 20-mile march because it works. It works, and not just for exploring the Antarctic, but it also works for our marketing and our campaigns. And so one of the most important suggestions I can make for business or for marketing is to break your year up into quarters. How many of you are doing that? If you are, throw some Q love down in the chat. And if you are and you didn't even realize it was a good thing, throw the Q in there. If you're not doing that, it's the most important thing you can do. And again, if you can't necessarily control the organization, you can at least control your piece of the puzzle and say, this is how we operate. We have 4 quarters, and each quarter has a goal, right? So you have that overall goal, get to the South Pole, but every quarter we have a goal to get in a certain amount of distance, a certain path, a certain number of leads or MQLs, whatever it might be. But break it into 4 parts. If you can align it with a company, that's fantastic. Otherwise, consider 3 months at a time. It's a fantastic way to divide things up. And most companies talk in a quarterly mentality, usually, and if they do, that's fantastic. But either way, consider having that approach because there's some really cool things that come from that. And I see a wish. Well, maybe this is the year. This is the decade, Kelly. And then also I see a yes, we focus on the quarter and then do a review at the mid-year point. That's fantastic. How are we doing? Kind of course correction. Are we on target to get to the South Pole? All right. And then here's just a picture of how we do it here at Chesh, right? So there's a system called Traction, and there's a book called Traction. It's one of my absolute favorite, most recommended books in business, and it ties into marketing beautifully, and also the whole organization. It's called Traction. So if you're not sure what to read when the aunts are running around going crazy and you want a little quiet time and with a fireplace, and Simon Sinek, you've already read him. Traction is the book. It's not exactly romantic reading. It is a business book. And now there's 2 books called Traction to confuse you. So it's written by a guy named Gino Wickman. But absolutely recommend you look up Traction, give it a read, because what it does is it talks about how do you plan things? Or even if you're a business, if you don't have certain processes and procedures in place, how do you approach it? Here's just a picture of how you approach that. You have a 1-year plan. You have certain goals. You have certain measurables you want to be responsible to. You want to be accountable to. And you have some written goals. Maybe aren't metrics. There may be, we want to hire this new person, or we want to establish an AdWords program or lead gen channel. We don't have one yet. That's a goal, priority for the year. And then you break that year up into the quarterly chunks. And then you see on there's rocks. So let's talk real quick about rocks. By the way, does anyone use EOS or Traction in their own companies right now? If not, highly recommend it. Oh, Andrew, great. Bob, great. Highly recommend you check it out. And if you want to buy a book for the CEO, maybe you buy him that. It's a great book. 100% great book. All right. So here's some jars here, and they kind of illustrate a point. And let's say you're trying to fill this jar up. And I say, okay, fill this jar up with as much as possible. Here you go. Start first with the sand. And now let's add in some pebbles. Let's add in some bigger pebbles. Now here's a bunch of rocks. Well, you don't have room for the rocks. That picture on the left, if you start with the sand and you kind of build up from there, you don't have room for that stuff on the top. Now here's the metaphor. All those different things in that glass jar are to-dos, are goals for the company, or goals for marketing, right? But the sand, those are like little tactical to-dos. That's like check the email stats, or answer that phone call or that email. So that just might be the day-to-day to-dos. You have the little bigger pebbles, might be like a marketing campaign. But let's say you had a really big goal like establish an AdWords channel or double the use of marketing automation on the CSI in this year, this quarter. You had some big to-dos you wanted to accomplish, big goals you wanted to accomplish. If you start with the minutia, you don't have room for the big stuff. But on the right-hand side, it's a different approach. You take that same amount of rocks and you put them in first. So you put the big ones in first, then you put in the small ones, then you dump all those little tactical minutia sand bits in there, and it fills in all the gaps. And you can actually get more of it done. You can actually get almost all of it done by starting by prioritizing the bigger, most important things. So we call those things rocks. And it's out of EOS, it's out of traction, but what they are quarterly goals. So we talked about a quarterly mindset. Consider quarterly goals. Now, quarterly goals are something that takes almost a quarter to do, right? So if you can do it in a week, if you do it in 2 weeks, that doesn't count as a quarterly rock. A quarterly rock is something that takes you, it might take you, 4 or 5 or 6. It might take you as many weeks as you have in a whole quarter, but you can get it done in a quarter. That's a quarterly rock. And this book better describes it, but it's a great concept because what it says is instead of having 17 goals, who's ever had that, right? And throw it in the chat. Have you ever had like 17 goals and, well, how many do you get done? If you have 20 goals for 2020, how many of those do you get done? Or even for a quarter? And remember that quote from earlier, we overestimate what we can get done in a year, overestimate what we can get done in a quarter. I've been in this situation where I have 20 goals and maybe I accomplish 10 of them, but that's fantastic, right? But you don't know which 10 they are. So with rocks, with quarterly goals, you pick. You might only have 3 or 5, but they will absolutely positively get done in that period of time. So start with the rocks. And what's really cool is these rocks can become your key quarterly campaigns. Here's a really cool campaign plan. Feel free to screenshot it. I mean, all this stuff, take it, use it, make it your own. But it's the same kind of idea. Start with quarterly campaigns. Start with that quarterly mindset. You've got a year, it bakes into quarters, and go from there and go from there and go from there. And so we're getting close on time. So let me just show you some of these resources I want you to take a look at. Here is one of my favorite starters, and you can go get it for free at Smartsheet. Hey, Smartsheet, thanks for the sheet. It's just if you don't have one of these yet, if you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants in marketing and you haven't necessarily established a marketing budget or marketing plan, this is a great way to do it. Wherever the money goes and the energy flows, right? Those are the areas to highlight on your marketing plan, and budget can really help that. But notice the columns in here. The costs come out over here. Projected goals, right? Here are the goals we want to get to. Don't just do webinars. Don't just do AdWords, partner lists without a goal in mind. If you don't know what the goal is, you got to ask them, got to shop around, but you don't just want to wing it and find out what you get in the end. You want to make sure initially the goal sounds good for what you're paying for. Now, things may change as you learn more, but you got to start somewhere. All right, measure and adapt. Does anyone here practice Agile in their marketing? And has anyone heard of it before? Has anyone a coder turned marketer? That's like me. I started in code. I realized I'm a much better marketer. I like people a bit more than I like lines of code and semicolons and that kind of thing. Agile marketing. I got to tell you, I'm very excited about it, and I think we might even do a webinar on it. If you're interested, write webinar. We'll do more on it. But I wanted to just touch on it for this planning meeting. If you're not into this yet, I highly recommend it. It's kind of like the rocks, but in case your company doesn't do all of this traction and all of the rocks kind of thing, it's a way of approaching, it's a way of segmenting the bigger picture goals into small chunks. And it's much more flexible. Just kind of take you back, how software development typically works is called a waterfall. You may have heard of it. That's where you figure out at the very beginning, okay, we need to build this app, or let's say in marketing, we're going to have like 20 email campaigns all around Agile marketing. We're going to do this. We're going to send them out to our list. All these things are going to happen, all these different coordinated actions. And it's going to take us a year to do all of them. Well, let's say you start that in January, but by the time you get to even halfway or even before that, you realize, oh, people don't like this. They hate this, or it's not really, the ROI is not there. We should change or modify. It doesn't matter. you're stuck doing it, because when you're doing waterfall development as a software developer, or when you're doing sort of this waterfall approach as a marketer, if you're stuck in your plans, you can't really change. You told the CEO you're going to do X, Y, and Z. So Agile marketing gives you a chance to be more flexible. And Kim, I don't know if you're doing Agile, but I love the fact that you're doing a review mid-year, because mid-year, maybe you were on a sugar high in January coming off the holidays when you decided some of your planning. So by the time the year is halfway done, you take a look at what you've been doing and you change things around. So anyways, Agile marketing, huge. I'm going to throw out 2 podcasts I want you to check out at the end of this, but it's fantastic. A couple things to highlight. Because one of the conversations I had is with a great marketer, a peer, often on these webinars, Alyssa, fantastic. And it's not hard to implement. That was the myth she smashed on the podcast. And oftentimes they'll do 2-week sprints. It's kind of it's their process. Every 2 weeks, they have what's called a spring planning meeting. See, I'm like winter mindset. I'm thinking about spring. They have a sprint planning meeting, and they're thinking about, what do we want to do in the next 2 weeks? Now, there's a whole process and she describes it, but you could see how if every 2 weeks you're stacking up and you're prioritizing all the most important things to do, and you're thinking about your quarterly goals, you're thinking about the goals for the year and where do they fit into the sprint, and how much time do you have individually. The whole team goes around and figures out how much time they have, and they are able to attack it. And guess what? At the end of the 2 weeks, one of the first things they do is they come back and they go, how did we do? And if they did well, great. If you learned something, great. You adjust your next 2 weeks. They also have a daily stand-up. Does anyone do a daily stand-up? One thing that blew my mind, it's called a stand-up because they want you to do the meeting standing up. Because if you do a meeting standing up, what happens? You're more likely to get it done a lot quicker because you're standing up. It's kind of awkward. You're just all standing around. Like, okay, we're standing up. Let's cut the chit chat and get right through it. And that's how her team of like 6 or 7 is able to get through it every day in like 15 minutes. It's because they're standing up. They're like, okay, guys, let's go. Let's go through the to-dos and the tacticals, and let's just check in on each other, do the stand-up, and get back to work and get out of here. You used to, yeah, it's in Conoco, you used to have a stand-up that lasted so long. Were you standing up for it? Did they make everyone stand up? See, I'd be that kind of guy. Like, okay, no, we're all standing up here for sure. We're all standing up. So 2 excellent resources, and I'm not sure on Alyssa. Keep an eye open for her. She will be coming out soon on the podcast. If you haven't heard the Hardcore Marketing Show, that's where I interview people. And this is where I'm learning things. So if you want to learn with me, and if you haven't checked out a podcast, check out this podcast. I don't say that to toot my horn because I'm not the one talking most of the time. Alyssa's talking. Roland's talking. Roland wrote the book on Agile Marketing. So I highly recommend you check that out. See, I'm giving you a whole bunch of books for this holiday season. Roland Smart wrote the book on Agile Marketing. Listen to his podcast first, see if it resonates with you. And then Alyssa, she's coming out soon, probably in the next week or so. And fantastic. She's a practitioner of it. They use it in their daily practice. She talks about the details of how to have a good stand-up meeting, how to have a good sprint planning meeting. It's fantastic. All right, and we're coming up to the end. So just kind of wanted to throw out some measurement strategies. These really all have their own webinars, so I don't have to talk too much about them as a whole right now. But no matter what, when it comes to these goals you're coming up with, make sure you have some numerical goals. If you heard of SMART goals, you want goals. We don't mean Roland SMART goals. We mean like SMART, actionable, measurable goals. Then for sure you make sure you have ROI or some kind of accountability metric blended into your strategy when it comes to planning. Hold yourself accountable. The rest of the organization will respect that, and then they'll give you more budget as you are showing that you're using the money wisely. Connected campaigns is huge. If you haven't already done that, we have a whole hour-long webinar on that. And by the way, if you want any of these webinars, you want links to them, send me an email, casey@CheshireImpact.com, and I will get you a link to those recordings because all these webinars have recordings. So if you want webinars on ROI and source reporting or connected campaign, we can get you that. Finally, last thing, it's kind of a sticking point. Avoid tracking everything. Avoid measuring everything, especially when it comes to goals. Avoid having too many goals. Getting back to having 20 goals and only getting 10 done or 1 done. What I don't want to see you do is have 1,000 different measurements, and the only one you're able to take action on is the opens. And I hate opens as a metric. So that's my least favorite. So it's like track a few and make some decisions. Make some actionable, have some actionable data so you can make decisions on it. And if you haven't done connected campaigns, these are the kind of things that come from it. We're going to do a webinar on this coming up. So stay tuned. In fact, tomorrow we're going to do a webinar on gated content. So content marketing, content stages, and all that kind of thing. All right, quick resources, then we'll wrap it up and get you out of here. If you're in Florida or Texas, you can go get some good weather. Podcasts, we kind of already shouted out to the Hardcore Marketing Show. Pardot Life Hacks, if you want the tech deep dive, Jennifer does that one, and she talks all about connected campaigns, for instance. She's also doing a new series right now, if you're interested, on the different objects in Salesforce. So it's almost like you're getting the Salesforce training with marketing context, and it's fantastic. So check that out. Both of those are on Stitcher, iTunes, Podcast, Spotify, all that good stuff. Hey, if you didn't know, the book is out. And speaking of Christmas gifts, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So it's on Amazon. If you hit that link up, it'll take you to the book on Amazon. Check it out. Check it out. It's on pre-order. All the things we're talking about here today, the planning, strategy, process technology, and then all the different ways of making your marketing automation better. That CSI we talked about earlier, every single step in the CSI is a chapter in the book. So check it out, and hopefully that can help you crush over the next couple of years. We're going to have some contests with the books too. So if you take a picture with one, we're going to hook you up in a little bit. So that's it. If you haven't met us, Cheshire Impact, we do both marketing automation, Pardot, and Salesforce. So if you have Salesforce problems, reach out. We're here to help. We also have workshops on not only these strategies, but we can also help you execute campaigns. A book of marketing automation. It's going to be in print, and it's ready for you. So with that, let's hop into Q&A.